So here we're going to do 9 and 10 together. This is similar to in the last video how we're basically accomplishing the same thing with these two queries, number 9 and number 10, but one of them uses a subquery and the other one does not. Here though you'll see the payoff is not as great. In the last video I really think the subquery was the way to go as far as the clean syntax was concerned. But here, not so much. So why don't we do this? And you know what, this will be good review as well with the joins. Number 9 says, write a join to get a list of all vendors that sell bars and squares. Pretend that you don't know the category number for bars and squares. So we're really going to query by bars and squares in quotes. Now the thing is, this is interesting because it's a three-way join. We have the vendor table. That's what we're being asked to get a list of vendor names ultimately. And the bars and squares are in this like item category table, all right? And then the middleman table is the inventory table. We really need all three in the mix here if we're going to make this work. So let's do it. All right, so let's see. We're being asked to find the vendor name, right? So we'll say select vendor name from, you know, I think because this is going to be a three-way join, let's do aliases just to make our lives easier. We'll say vendor is V, item, what is it, item category, item underscore category, I believe, yeah, as cat, or how about, yeah, we'll say cat. And then, let's see, there's inventory as I, okay. And then the where clause is going to be quite a bit here, where v dot vendor ID equals I dot vendor ID, okay, and this is a three-way join here, and I dot, I believe it's category ID equals cat dot category ID. Let me check that. Yeah, that should do it. Oh, and hang on here. And category name. We're asked about the bars and squares. Remember, category name equals bars and squares. Okay. All right. You know what? Let me run this. Jeez. All right. Let's see here. Oh, here. I don't want that dot there. I don't know what that was all about. Okay. So there we have it. Now we're seeing dupes here because for example, Venchi here we have apparently Venchi has three items that are categorized as bars and squares. Demori has two under bars and squares. So you're going to get a hit. You're going to get that name for every one of the items that they have. That's either, you know, that's the bars or squares category. So you know what you can do if you don't like all these dupes, we can just put the word distinct in here. Select distinct vendor name, so that will eliminate the dupes. So here we really just have a list of 7 vendors that have bars and squares. So that was one way of doing it. All right, here's another way to accomplish this. We're going to rewrite it using a subquery. And, you know, I'm thinking what we can do, I'm going to copy this. I think what I'll do is I'm going to maybe change this to the vendor ID. So I'm going to get all the vendor IDs that have just that have bars and squares in the inventory table. Select distinct. Oh yeah, you know what this is? I have aliases here, and I have to qualify it because it's a three-way join, and vendor ID is an ambiguous column name. It appears in two of the three tables. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run that. So here's a list of the vendor IDs of those 7 vendors that have bars and squares. So, you know, if I want a name from those, I can change this whole thing to a subquery. Okay, and say select vendor name from vendor. Oops. Okay. and then I can say where vendor ID in, and then when it's in here, okay, which is, you know, this set here. So, you know, again, I guess the moral of this story is that we didn't really gain much by doing this with a subquery. In fact, the non-subquery was probably a lot nicer and cleaner and less code when it came down to it. So just because you can do subqueries doesn't mean you should always use those as your first option. Just think about it, and if you can make it happen without one, then, you know, maybe go the easier way. Or as we saw in the last video, we could have done it both ways, and the subquery was the better way to go. So you know, it's just a matter of preference and trying to keep your code as clean and legible as possible.